Buckle up, everyone. You are strapped in and ready for the Insurance Hour with me, your host, Carl Sussman, informing, educating, and entertaining Californians one policy at a time. This is Insurance Hour. Hello, Carl Sussman here, and thank you so much for joining us. This is, of course, Insurance Hour, and I am your host. We are here to try and help you out with your insurance questions and answers and help you be educated in general on how insurance works, especially how things are working these days because things are changing. Phone lines are open. You can reach me at 559-656-0317, or you can send your questions into questions@insurancehour.com. If you miss any part of the show, you can find it on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it pretty much everywhere. iHeartRadio, Amazon Alexa. Sorry, I said that. Hopefully it's not activating everybody's system. So let's just jump right in because we've got a lot to cover today. With everything going on in the world of insurance and regulations and things that are going to be impacting what we pay, how we pay, and what carriers we're able to pay, I thought I would take a step back for California's sake and talk a little bit about current regulations and the genesis of Proposition 103. So let's start from the beginning and go back and see how we got where we are today with Proposition 103, what it was designed to do, what it's doing, and everything else in between. So we need to go back to the genesis, to the beginning. So we're in the 80s, right? We're in the early 80s, and originally we're talking about the time when MTV and music videos were all the rage. Personal computers were just starting to become a thing. We had the Apple IIe, Apple IIc. We had the Commodore 64. We had some video games that we were able to play as well at home. It was a different time, right? Fashion were looking a little different than they are today as well. We're talking shoulder pads, neon colors, leg warmers. I know, maybe I'm feeling a little nostalgic now, but if you were around then, you would know it was a very different look and a different feel. Michael Jackson and Madonna basically were dominating the airwaves. I remember actually on MTV with Michael Jackson, they used to air Thriller every hour on the hour. So if you wanted to watch that video, then you would have to stand by and watch it at that point. TV shows like The A-Team, Miami Vice, Cheers, that was all the rage. And as far as the economy was going, and in general, regulations, we had what were called Reaganomics that were coming into play. So we had President Reagan, who was elected for 2 terms. A little bit of history if you're curious. He was actually the governor in California as a Democrat and then ended up running as a Republican president. Who knew, right? So Reaganomics was big, and Reaganomics had a lot to do with cutting taxes, deregulation, increasing military spending. It was a very, very specific tenets that they went by. They were famous for getting rid of the unions for air traffic controllers and basically firing a lot of them to help out with the deregulation. Mental hospitals that were state funded, a lot of that were federally funded were cut back. And again, there was a lot of focus on privatization and military spending. In addition to that, we had lots of fears from the Cold War, right? This was our big enemy, Russia, and the fears of nuclear weapons and total annihilation. I think that was when the movie came out, Day After Tomorrow, and it was one of the scary ones showing about what happens when there's a nuclear bomb, which only Hollywood could come up with a way to show you what happens in a matter of seconds and make it last an hour and a half long movie, right? Technology-wise, we had things like the VCR first coming out, cable TV. These were new things. Music, again, hip-hop, rap, punk, new wave. Health and social-wise, there was the AIDS epidemic, of course, and Nancy Reagan's famous war on drugs, then the Just Say No. The famous commercial for this is your brain on drugs, and the guy cracks the egg and it's frying. Very, very classic. If you haven't seen it, check it out on YouTube. There was a lot of distrust with regard to the government at this period of time as well. After the Watergate issue and the Vietnam War, and then came the Iran-Contra affair, it was not a time when people tended to have a lot of, what's the right way to put this? They were suspect of government, suspect of big government. And I think that's in part why we saw a lot of Reaganomics and a lot of popularity for Ronald Reagan was because he was the antithesis of not big government. He was all about, let's just deal with defense and let the private industry do what they do best. Lots of deregulation. And finally, we can't forget about this. This was the dawn of the 24-hour news cycle, right? This was the time when people would have the ability where we could sit down and watch TV 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Wow. And I'm not so sure that was ever a good thing to start, but we certainly have it now. We have news available all the time. So keep in mind, I'm bringing all these points up to you because this was the era that Proposition 103 was spawned in. You can sort of get an idea right now. It was a different world, different environment, different economics, different technology, different social attitudes, different everything. Now, back in the late 80s in California, again, insurance premiums were escalating significantly. And specifically, auto insurance premiums were escalating to levels that were never really seen before. There was very little oversight. Again, this was part of all of the deregulation and let the private carriers, let the private companies do what they do. And at the same time, while all of these premiums were increasing, the insurance carriers in general were showing record profits. Now, this is ripe for the picking, right? If the carriers are saying we're making a ton of money and premiums are going up, this is not going to be sustainable. This is not going to be something that's going to last forever because nobody likes that. That is not a good thing, right? So we have high profits for the insurance industry, high premiums for the consumers. Lawmakers were failing time after time to try and pass legislation in Sacramento to try and tackle some of these issues. So there was a lot of public pressure to try and find a way to reel in the insurance industry, make it in a fashion that was more consumer friendly, more consumer protections, and at the same time maintain a healthy competitive environment for insurance carriers to continue to compete in. Now, this was what was happening in the late 80s. Now, we're going to see what some other states were dealing with at the same time, because I want you to get an idea of some different avenues that could have gone on back in that time during when Proposition 103 was being pitched and then eventually was put on the ballot. So stick around, because when we come back, we're going to talk about that and what some other states were doing to handle this. I'm Carl Sussman, and this is Insurance Hour.
In today's uncertain times, navigating the California insurance marketplace can feel like a journey through uncharted waters. That's where Sussman Insurance Agency steps in, guiding you with the wisdom of experience and the care of family. We at Sussman Insurance Agency understand the complexities of finding the right coverage in these challenging times. With decades of expertise and a heritage spanning 2 generations, we're more than just insurance agents. We're your trusted advisors, your navigators in the sea of insurance options. Treating our clients like family isn't just a phrase, it's our commitment. We listen, we understand, and we provide solutions tailored to your unique needs. Why? Because to us, you're a part of the Sussman family. Don't let the tides of uncertainty sway you. Anchor your trust in Sussman Insurance Agency. Call us today at 877-411-5200 or visit SussmanInsurance.com. Have specific questions? Drop us an email at sales@SussmanInsurance.com. At Sussman Insurance Agency, we're not just in the business of policies. We're in the business of peace of mind. Sussman Insurance Agency, navigating your insurance life together.
Hello, Carl Sussman here. You are tuned into Insurance Hour. Thanks for being here with me. Lots to learn, lots to go over today. Remember, the phones are open, 559-656-0317. You can also send your questions to questions@insurancehour.com. If you need immediate insurance help, you can also use pound 250 and ask for an insurance quote. Dial pound 250, just say insurance quote, whatever it is you need, say it. We'll get you to someone that can help. Now, before the break, we were talking about the beginning of Proposition 103, what the environment was like in California. And what I wanted to do now is step back one tiny bit and talk about other states other than California and what they were doing around that time and a little bit later to try and combat the same thing, because California was not the only state that was dealing with high premiums and high profits from the insurance industry in general. For example, in 1988, New Jersey passed what was called the Auto Insurance Reform Act of 1988. Effectively, it rolled back prices lowered prices for insurance premiums and freeze any type of premium increase for a period of time. Discounts for good drivers were also introduced, meaning if you met certain criteria, you had to be classified as a good driver, and they had to go based on that and charge specific types of rates and use specific types of underwriting criteria. And finally, there was increased regulation as well. Remember, we're in the 80s when regulation was being frowned on, so these were some other states doing some other things. Much later, in the early 2000s, Massachusetts changed their regulations where the states had to get prior approval in order to file for any type of a rate change. Interestingly enough, Texas has what's called file and use, what basically means they're able to make changes to their policies, immediately enact them, and then send the information on to their state Department of Insurance. The state Department of Insurance then has the ability to come back and say, yeah, no, and go back and forth until they come to some form of compromise to be comfortable with, and then the insurance industry has to adjust based on what the department said. New York came out with prior approval ratings again for their Department of Insurance. And Florida also came out with regulations that said that rates needed to be approved. So this was definitely something that was ripe for the picking. Because again, when you have high premiums and high profit, that disconnect tends to sow some discontentment. So enter the ballot measure in 1987. It was for the November 8th, 1987 ballot in California. And this is exactly what the ballot measure read. It said, and I'm reading this quote, requires minimum 20% rate reduction from November 8th, 1987 levels for automobile and other property casualty insurance. Freezes all rates from November 8th, 1989 unless insurance company is substantially threatened with insolvency. Thereafter, requires every insurer offer any eligible person a good driver policy with 20% differential. Requires public hearing and approval by elected insurance commissioner for automobile, other property and casualty rate changes. Requires auto premiums be determined primarily by driving record. Prohibits discrimination, price fixing, unfair practices by insurance companies. Requires commissioner provide comparative pricing information. Authorizes insurance activities by banks. Summary of legislative analysis estimate of net state and local impact. This proposition would increase Department of Insurance administrative fees by $10 to $15 million in the first year, varying thereafter with the workload, to be paid by additional fees of the insurance industry. State and some local governments would have unknown savings for lower insurance rates. Gross premium tax reduction of approximately $125 million for the first 3 years, offset by required premium tax adjustment. Thereafter, possible state revenue loss if rate reductions and discounts continue, but gross premium is not adjusted. That's it. That was what was on the ballot. And the average person looks at that and says, cool, they have to reduce my rate. They can't raise my rate. All is good. Another part that's important to be aware of is as you know, if you look at the ballot, it also lists fiscal impacts, and some of them are included in there. And as you can see, it's an increase in administrative fees, a decrease in revenue. And then the breakout for that from the California Legislative Analysis Office said, and again, I'll read the quote, would increase Department of Insurance administrative costs by $10 to $15 million in the first year, varying with the workload, to be paid by additional fees on the insurance industry. So they're going to be increasing spending on the insurance department by $10 to $15 million just in the first year, and that would have to be paid for by the insurance industry. And you can guess how that trickles down to consumers, but we'll move on from here. State and local governments would have unknown savings from lower insurance rates, so no real knowledge, no real crystal ball at that point. Gross premium tax reduction of approximately $125 million for the first 3 years. So they're saying that in the first 3 years, the state's going to lose about $125 million. Thereafter, state revenue loss if rate reductions continue. So if the bill continues to do what it's supposed to do, continued losses for revenue for the state. So if we're looking at this fiscally, And we're the state of California, and this is probably why the legislature back then did not pass anything that did anything along these lines, was we're going to increase spending on the government program, the Department of Insurance, and we're going to reduce the amount of revenue that the state is generating. Not usually something that is a political good thing, right? Increase spending and decrease income for the state. Remember, we're talking about the 80s, a time when deregulation, when less government is something that people are really focusing on. So this was definitely an outlier as far as what was being done. Now, what's interesting, as you can imagine, is how this particular proposition was marketed. And what's interesting is, back in the 80s, again, different world, there was something called the Fairness Doctrine. The Fairness Doctrine said that television stations and public media had to provide equal time to both sides of news events. Propositions certainly fell on that. So free of cost, if one potential side of the story is spending money on advertising and they're spending X number of dollars, by law, the news stations have to give that same amount of time to the other side of the story, you might look at it, free of charge. So the people that were promoting Proposition 103 were benefiting greatly by the Fairness Doctrine because, as you can imagine, the insurance industry was not happy with this legislation and they were spending a lot of money. The people that were pushing Proposition 103 did not have anywhere near that amount of money, and the Fairness Doctrine kicked in and enabled them to get their message across free of charge. Let's find out a little bit about what happens next. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we will talk about some of the ramifications of the ballot measure, where it went, and where it's going from here. I'm Carl Sussman, and this is Insurance Hour.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, in just a few moments, the Window to the Magic podcast show will begin.
My name is Patrick.
My name is Calvin.
I'm Mouseketeer Greg.
My name is Paul, and I will be your guide through the wonderful world of Disney sound experiences.
This show is a weekly trip into the world of the Disney theme parks and resorts.
And this is the place where you get to use your ears to surround yourself with the magic.
For your safety, please remain seated while listening to the WindowToTheMagic.com podcast.
Maybe there's a name for this, something like Disnotic obsession. Please visit windowtothemagic.com for more information, or you can find us on Apple Podcasts and in the iHeartMedia app.
Hello. Welcome back. Carl Sussman. This is Insurance Hour. Thanks so much for being here and learning and getting a little history lesson at the same time. These are important issues, and I hope that you're paying attention. And if you do have questions, you'll reach out to me so I can try and address them for you. Phones are open, 559-656-0317, or you can always email later at questions@insurancehour.com. If you've missed any part of the show, be sure that you check on YouTube or check on any of your podcast favorites. You will find Insurance Hour, and you'll have a copy of this there. In the meantime, if you do need immediate help with your insurance, you can simply dial pound 250, use the keyword insurance, and you will get connected with an agent that can help you right away. Before the break, we were talking about Proposition 103 and the ramifications and how it was billed and how it was sold and how it was advertised. So the way the bill was promoted, if you will, was and I took some of these quotes from headlines that I was able to find. It was sold as a, quote, rate rollback, 20%. It was also known as a fight against the insurance industry greed, and also as, quote, elect the insurance commissioner for accountability. So people are looking at this and they're saying, well, I would like to pay less for my insurance. Who wouldn't? And if this bill, all I have to do is vote yes, and I'm going to get my rate rolled back 20%, and they're not going to be able to charge me a higher premium, great. And that was the marching order, basically. That was what it was all about. That's what the ads were about. That's what the talking points were about. It was talking about, again, how there's this greed with insurance carriers, and they're making all this money, we're paying all this money, we have to get them more in line. Interestingly enough, again, we're talking about the 80s when private industry, private business was at an all-time high as far as consumer thinking was, right? And the insurance industry, for better or for worse, wasn't necessarily viewed as a private industry, even though, as we know, it is. As a matter of fact, in California alone, the insurance industry is responsible for over 300,000 jobs. So just to put some perspective on it. Interestingly enough, after all the push and that very obvious who wouldn't want to save money ballot measure, Proposition 103 did pass barely. It passed by a margin of 51%, 51.13 to 48.87. So a very, very close ballot measure indeed. These days it would probably be disputed. I don't believe that it was at that point because back then we simply took the elections and we believed them and moved forward. So Proposition 103 became the law of the land. And let's go over what some of the provisions were in the proposition more specifically. So now we see where we were in time. We see how we got there. We see why we got there. We see how the bill passed. What is this bill going to do? So here are the highlights for you. The purpose was to reform the insurance industry in California. It was going to address the high insurance rates for automobile and property casualty insurance. It was going to address the lack of regulation and oversight of the insurance industry in general. It was also going to tackle unfair rate-setting practices that were not based on driving records, which is interesting because you would think auto insurance, you would rate them based on their driving record. Turns out, and we know this, in hindsight, that there are many factors that can impact someone's propensity to have a car accident or a speeding ticket other than their driving record. But that's for another time. Key provisions, and again, it mandated a 20% premium reduction in insurance rates. It froze premium rates at 1987 levels until November 8th, 1989. And it required public hearings and an insurance commissioner approval for any future rate changes. It also created the establishment of an elected insurance commissioner. Now, this is a big deal because previously the insurance commissioner was appointed by the governor. So, yes, we would basically elect the governor. Hopefully he's the guy we want or the gal we want, and they would appoint the insurance commissioner. Well, Proposition 103 said, no, we don't want that. We want the people to have a direct say in their insurance commissioner. So this created an elected position for the insurance commissioner. Additionally, I'm just going through some of the notes again, and I see all of the highlights for how the bill was sold. Save money on your insurance bills, bring fairness to the insurance rates, hold insurance companies accountable, elect an insurance commissioner to fight for you. And this is it. This was on the final ballot. When you have those final little summaries, it said, ballot showed mark a yes vote, and you support a minimum of a 20% rate reduction for automobile and other property insurance casualty rates. Vote no if you do not want this. Again, it doesn't surprise me that it actually passed because, again, who's not going to vote for lower premiums in general? Proposition 103 also allowed for what's called interveners. An intervener is an individual or a company or an organization that decides that they're not happy with what the insurance carrier is trying to do at any particular time with one of their filings. They might not like the premium that they're trying to submit. They might not like the underwriting guidelines they might submit. So what they do is they have the ability to act as a pseudo Department of Insurance and insurance commissioner, and they can have what's called a public hearing where they sit down and they'll talk with the insurance carriers and they'll talk with the Department of Insurance. They'll voice their concerns and they'll come up with some type of a resolution before any type of changes can be made. Interesting point that we have a Department of Insurance that does that. The intervener process was an add-on, right? It was there to try and help people feel that much more connected to what's happening in the insurance industry. Because if you're living in an area, you're having trouble getting insurance, or you think that you were wronged in some way, you could go as an individual and stand there and pound your fist on the table and say, this is wrong, explain this to me, make this right. In reality, what ended up happening is the people that actually created Proposition 103, since Proposition 103 was enacted, there's been one organization, and that's the organization that created Proposition 103, that's been responsible for 75% of every time there's been an intervention. So Proposition 103 creators created an intervening process, and then 75% of that they handled themselves. In the last 5 years, that number has actually gone up to close to 90%. Now, the cost of intervening, right? If a person, or in this case, the group that created Proposition 103, intervenes on a rate, that's going to cost money, right? It's going to cost the insurance company. They're going to have to pay costs. The Department of Insurance has to pay. They all have to get together, right? All that costs money. Those costs are paid back to the entity or individual, or again, in this case, 90% of the time to this organization. So they get all their money, and that premium, the charges that they're paying back to them inevitably will get passed down to consumers. Has to go somewhere, right? So I want to talk a little bit more about Proposition 103. Specifically, I want to talk to you about some of the side effects that it had. And then after that, I want to talk to you about some of the changes that have already happened to that law since 1987, because people tend to think that it was perfect and it's never been changed. It's been changed quite a bit. Let's talk about it when we come back. I'm Carl Sussman, and this is Insurance Hour.
Do you need homeowners insurance? Has your previous insurance company left the state, non-renewed your policy, or maybe they just raised your premium to an amount that you simply can't afford? Whatever the situation, we can help. Just dial pound 250 on your cell phone and say keyword insurance quote, and we will connect you with an agent who can assist you right away. Or if you prefer, you can visit us online at insurancehour.com/quotes. Whether you're looking for homeowners insurance or auto insurance, we'll send the best options straight to you. So, what are you waiting for? Simply dial pound 250 and say keyword insurance quote, and we will connect you with a live agent to help provide competitive quotes for your homeowners insurance or auto insurance. Don't get caught unprepared. Insure what matters with an insurance company you can trust and with a premium that you can afford. Don't put off until tomorrow what you should have done yesterday. Simply dial pound 250 on your cell phone and say keyword insurance quote.
We all love children, and many of us have an old car, truck, or van in the driveway. Find the Children has a great way for you to put your unwanted vehicle to good use. Keep listening. Every year, thousands of kids go missing. Trust me, it's a parent's worst nightmare. When a child goes missing, every moment counts, and you need all of the help you can get. Find the Children is a non-profit organization dedicated to locating missing children and bringing them home safely. You can help support their mission by donating your car, truck, van, or SUV. A towing company will come and pick up your car for free, running or not, and the donation of your car is tax deductible. Your help is providing the funds they need to continue their services. Call now, donate your old vehicle to Find the Children, and get free pickup. Here's the number:
800-403-6517. 800-403-6517. 800-403-6517. That's 800-403-6517.
Hello, Carl Sussman, and this is Insurance Hour. Thank you once again for being with us today. We are learning all about Proposition 103 today. If you have specific questions, feel free to call 559-656-0317 or email your question into questions@insurancehour.com. Also, if you do need help with your insurance right away, you can simply dial pound 250, use the keyword insurance, get transferred to an agent right away. Now, we've been talking about Proposition 103, and we've been talking about how it came to be, the environment that was going on at that time, and what the law actually said. Now, we assume that when the law is passed that it becomes gospel, and that's just the law, and that's just the way it is. People have actually referred to Proposition 103 as the insurance Bible in California. Unchanging and unwavering. I want to dispel that myth and go over some of the major changes that have already occurred to the proposition, starting with the year after it went into effect. But before I do that, there are a few things I want to mention that I want you to be aware of. There's something called precedent, and it's, I believe, a legal term, and I'm not an attorney, a disclaimer there. Precedent has to do with if one person or if something is done at one point, then if it's done again, you can always look back and say, hey, well, it was done over there, so it must be okay to do it over here. And there were some very interesting precedents that were set with Proposition 103. When the law comes in and tells a private company what they're allowed to charge for something, or in this particular case, forcing them to lower their price by an arbitrary number, it sets a very interesting precedent. Try and imagine this. Let's say you're shopping for a Toyota and the window stickers, 30 grand, 31 grand. But the Department of Transportation in California says, you know what, Toyota, I think we need to make these cars a little more affordable. I want you to knock off 10 grand from the price of the car. Oh no, you don't have a choice. If you're selling cars in California, you're going to charge 10 grand less. Period. It's literally no different than what happened based on Proposition 103, which literally just told the private insurance companies that were licensed to do business in California, you will lower your rate by 20%. Moreover, you will not increase your rate at all for a minimum of 2 years. So back to Toyota. So the precedent was set at that point that the voters of California, in this case, I can't say the government because this was legislation that was passed by the voters in California, set this precedent that you can go to a private company and mandate they change their price. Literally. Toyota, not $30,000 for your car, $20,000. And by the way, don't even think of raising that price again for at least 2 years. How does that work exactly? What are the mechanics of that? How is that financially feasible for, again, we're picking on poor Toyota, for Toyota or for a private insurance company? As you can imagine, it's challenging, to say the least. Now, I don't have any type of inside knowledge to be able to try and explain how the industry in general survived when all of a sudden they had to make these dramatic changes. However, looking back actuarially, I can tell you that once the proposition passed, it did not take long before it was, of course, there were some challenges by the insurance companies. They were saying they need time to make these changes. They were trying to find ways to, extend the runway while they figured out how in the world they were going to take their bottom line, their net dollars coming in, and cut them by 20%. Again, think about that again. Imagine if Apple Computer, actually I take it back, they just became Apple Inc. I still think of them as Apple Computers. That was actually the corporation's name initially. What if the state decided to say, you know what, Apple, we think everyone needs to get these iPads cheaper. So we want you to charge 20% less. It's not a choice. You will charge 20% less. And by the way, don't think about raising that price for at least 2 years. Oh, and one other thing. Before you're allowed to raise that price by that price again in 2 years, we want to look at it to be sure you really need the money. Yeah, Apple. Now, we all know that Apple certainly is not in need of funds. So the likelihood is that they probably would be stuck having to charge that lower premium on the iPad indefinitely. Is that fair? Up for debate. Is that legal? Up for debate. Did it happen in 1987 and affect every private insurance company in California? It did. The immediate fallout was many insurance carriers no longer did business in California. So there was an immediate exodus of companies that simply threw up their hands and said, we can't operate in this environment. We don't have a problem with an insurance commissioner. We don't have a problem with fair rates. We don't have a problem with non-discriminatory practices, but we literally cannot financially afford to just arbitrarily take 20% off of what we're charging for the next 2 years and then hope that in 2 years we can try and eke our way back to profitability. They just couldn't. So they left. When those carriers left, of course, we had less competition left in California. Some carriers left, some stayed, some smaller companies tried to come in to fill the void, but there was a big shakeup, a big shakedown, if you will, because all of a sudden the environment that the private carriers were working within was under heavy scrutiny. Not a judgment call, just a fact. One of the other important factors to understand about the insurance industry in California is now that it had an elected insurance commissioner, individuals, residents in California, had the direct ability to put somebody in the insurance commissioner's chair that had full control. This was the individual that would have to basically do their bidding. This would be the individual that would sit and have to communicate with the insurance carriers anytime the insurance carrier wanted to make any kind of a change. It would have to go to the Department of Insurance. The Department of Insurance would have to approve it, disapprove it. The timeline for that process was anywhere from months to sometimes years. The reason for that is beyond the scope of this show. Just accept it at face value that both the Department of Insurance as well as insurance carriers will tell you that One of the biggest challenges they face is that time period when they're trying to get a change made to a policy and it has to get through the red tape and the bureaucracy. Side note, the sustainable insurance strategy that our current insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara, is putting through is going to cut that process way down. And the trailer bill that Governor Newsom is pushing to be signed into law in a matter of days is going to expedite that process even further. So let's take one more quick break, and then I want to talk to you about the insurance commissioner's responsibility, how consumers get that responsibility into the power of one individual, and as importantly, I want to take the next segment and talk to you about changes that have already been made to Proposition 103. Remember, this law was passed when we were wearing padded shoulder pads and Michael Jackson's Thriller was on the radio and we had our first computers at home. It was a very, very different world than it is currently. So what has happened with Proposition 103 since then to update it? Let's talk about that as soon as we come back from this break.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, in just a few moments, the Window to the Magic podcast show will begin.
My name is Patrick.
My name is Calvin.
I'm Mouseketeer Gray.
My name is Paul, and I will be your guide through the wonderful world of Disney sound experiences.
This show is a weekly trip into the world of the Disney theme parks and resorts.
And this is the place where you get to use your ears to surround yourself with the magic.
For your safety, please remain seated while listening to the windowtothemagic.com podcast.
Maybe there's a name for this, something like Disnotic obsession. Please visit windowtothemagic.com for more information, or you can find us on Apple Podcasts and in the iHeart Media app.
Hello. Welcome back. Carl Sussman, Insurance Hour. Thank you so much for being here. We are going over a lot of important stuff today. So if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. Call me anytime at 559-656-0317. If you are catching this at a later time and you're listening to this on a podcast or on YouTube, remember, you can still call that phone number, leave a message with your question, and I will get to it. You can also email your question to questions@insurancehour.com. If you do need immediate insurance help, you can dial pound 250, use the keyword insurance, and somebody will be able to jump on and help you right away. Okay, Proposition 103. The tenet being that premiums must be fair but not excessive, adequate but not excessive. And that sounds legitimate. That's not necessarily how things panned out. But what I want to talk about right now, because I keep promising to, is that we're going to talk about all of the changes that have already occurred to Proposition 103. Because you hear about the sustainable insurance strategy, which is what Ricardo Lara is putting forward now to be able to modernize Proposition 103, which gives you the feeling that they haven't made any changes to it. Certainly the people that founded and put the proposition on the ballot would like everyone to think that it is so good, it has had no changes. It's had some changes. I'm going to go through them with you right now. Remember, the proposition passed in 1987. The initial amendment was in 1988. And it established the criteria for a good driver discount, including licensing and driving safety requirements, basically saying you have to have a valid license, one or less moving violation in 3 years, and no at-fault accident with bodily injury in 3 years. What does that mean? Well, that means that if you and I are both drivers, I've never had a ticket or an accident, you have 5 speeding tickets, and you have 3 accidents without injury and 2 accidents with injury. After 3 years, you and I pay the same rate. That's what it means. It means everybody gets a reset after 3 years. And because of the provision with fault and not at fault, it also means that if you're involved in an accident and you are only 49% at fault, then there is no premium change that's permitted. Now, I get it. 49% is not your fault. Less than half, right? But 49% is pretty darn close to, 50-50, right? It's 1% off. However, that's not something that you're not able to put that into your underwriting or premium checks, which again has its own ramifications. Additionally, because of this hard reset every 3 years, some will say that driving records started to become uglier because people thought, if I get a speeding ticket, I can go to traffic school once and it disappears. And if I get another one, who cares? Because 3 years later, it's gone. They might have accidents. It's okay because in 3 years, it's gone. So did Prop 103 create Did Proposition 103 create worse drivers? Well, if you're focusing strictly on their pocketbook, the answer could be yes. The next amendment to Proposition 103 was in 1990, September 24th, 1990, and it provided clarification on the criteria for a good driver discount. It clarified the length of time as a good driver and what a minor violation and a major violation is. Well, I just described that to you. Apparently, it still wasn't clear enough 3 years after what was going to be considered a good driver and what was not going to be considered a good driver. The next one was going to be, again, in 1990, September the 30th, very soon thereafter. It introduced regulations for timely scheduling and conducting of hearings for rate changes. 15 to 30 days notice for a public hearing. Not a lot of time. Interestingly enough, again, the sustainable insurance strategy has that same provision to allow for an intervening process. That has stayed exactly the same. We still have that same public overview process. Then we jump to 1992, and they further refine the definition for eligibility for the good driver discount policy. You're seeing a trend here? It seems like they really weren't clear when the bill passed what was going to be considered a good driver, which is a little bit scary, but at the same time not surprising since, as I mentioned earlier on in the show, this was focused on just lowering the rate. The underwriting portions were fairly fuzzy, especially if you can see in the first 3 years it already